The rejection of Princess Villia. The grand court of the galactic empire on the planet Viridian was a dazzling display of power, wealth, and grandeur. The colossal chamber was lined with gold-adorned pillars that reached up into the vaulted ceiling, where streams of light cascaded down from enormous crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with the chatter of diplomats, scientists, and military officers, all of them discussing matters of great importance. However, amidst the galaxy's elite, there was one figure who stood out, though not for the reasons she hoped. Princess Villia of the Andoran was small, remarkably so. At just over a meter tall, she was dwarfed by the towering alien figures around her. Her race, known for their delicate frames and graceful features, had long been dismissed by the more physically dominant species of the galaxy. To many in the court, she was a curiosity at best, and a symbol of the Andorans' decline at worst. Her species had once been powerful, their technology and culture revered across the stars, but the passage of time had seen them reduced to a fraction of their former glory. Now, Villia was the last of her kind, a princess without a kingdom to rule, a leader without followers. As Villia moved through the hall, her silken robes, woven from the finest materials of her homeworld, flowed behind her, shimmering in the light of the chandeliers. The fabric, dyed in the colors of her planet's twin moons, was a stark contrast to the cold, metallic surroundings of the court. Yet, despite the beauty and elegance of her appearance, she felt small and invisible, as if the entire galaxy had turned its back on her. The murmurs of the other delegates filled the air, cutting through her thoughts like a blade. What's the point of having her here? The Andoran haven't mattered in centuries, one delegate scoffed, his voice carrying across the room. A midget princess from a forgotten race, another added with a sneer. Villia's heart twisted with each passing word. She had spent years fighting for recognition, trying to prove that her size did not diminish her worth, that her intellect, her courage, and her ability to lead were what truly mattered. But it seemed that no matter how hard she tried, the galaxy refused to see her as anything more than a relic. She stopped for a moment near one of the large viewing windows that overlooked the shining city of Viridian. Below, the sprawling metropolis was alive with activity. The golden spires of the capital reached toward the sky, reflecting the light of the sun as it dipped below the horizon. It was a breathtaking sight. Yet, as she gazed down at it, Villia couldn't shake the feeling that she was nothing more than a ghost in a place that didn't truly welcome her. She had fought for this moment, worked tirelessly to be accepted, and yet she still found herself battling rejection at every turn. The Andoran had always been a peaceful people, focused on knowledge, diplomacy, and the pursuit of understanding. But that had made them vulnerable. While other races had grown in strength and power, the Andoran had remained small, isolated, and largely forgotten. Villia's father had been the last great ruler of their empire, but he had died young, leaving the throne to her, a young woman with no allies, no support, and no real army to command. She had inherited a dying legacy, and she had worked tirelessly to preserve what little was left of it. Yet, the galaxy's leaders, who had once praised the Andorans' wisdom, now looked at her as if she were nothing more than a relic of a bygone age. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp voice behind her. "You always seem to find the loneliest spots, princess." She spun around, startled by the sound. Standing in the doorway was a tall human man, dressed in the uniform of Earth's diplomatic forces. His rugged features were softened by a warm smile, and his eyes held a hint of curiosity as they met hers. Despite his intimidating height, there was something about him, something kind, that made her feel a sense of ease she hadn't felt in a long time. "I didn't mean to intrude," he continued, stepping onto the balcony with her. "I just thought you might like some company." Villia hesitated for a moment, her instincts warning her to be cautious. The galaxy was filled with political intrigue, and she had learned long ago to be wary of those who offered kindness so freely. But there was something different about this man. His demeanor was open, unguarded. She studied him carefully, searching for any sign of malice, but found none. "Captain Eli Jameson," he said, introducing himself. "And you must be Princess Vilya. I hope I got that right." She raised an eyebrow. "Most don't bother to learn my name." Eli shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Well, I'm not most people. I've seen how you handle yourself in there," he said, nodding toward the court. Impressive, given the circumstances. Vilya's lips quirked into a small smile, though she quickly masked it. Impressive. I'm not sure anyone else would agree. "They're blind," Eli replied, his voice steady but firm. "You carry yourself like someone who knows she belongs, even when the world tries to say otherwise. That's no small feat." For the first time in what felt like years, Vilya felt something shift within her. It was subtle, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds after a storm, but it was there. Eli's words were simple, yet they carried a weight she hadn't expected. She felt seen, not as a princess in name only, not as the last of her race, but as a person, worthy of respect, worthy of being noticed. A silence settled between them, but it was a comfortable one. Vilya found herself drawn to this human, who seemed to see her for what she truly was. "What brings you to the Galactic Court?" she asked, her voice softening. "Guard duty," Eli answered with a chuckle. "Not exactly glamorous, but it gives me a front-row seat to all the drama. And occasionally, I get to meet someone interesting." "Interesting," Vilya echoed, her eyebrow lifting. "You find me interesting." "More than interesting," Eli replied, his tone warm and sincere. "You stand out in ways I didn't expect. You're not just another princess. You're someone who's fighting for something that's worth fighting for, even when everyone else has already given up." Vilya looked away, momentarily overwhelmed by the unexpected warmth that flooded through her. She had heard many words in her life: praise, mockery, indifference, but never anything like this. Something about Eli's words made her feel stronger, more capable than she had ever felt in the presence of the galaxy's so-called elite. For the first time in what felt like forever, Princess Vilya felt a spark of hope, hope that perhaps there was more to her story than rejection, more than loneliness. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was someone out there who saw her for who she truly was. As the evening wore on, and the court buzzed with politics and power plays, Vilya found herself thinking about Eli Jameson more than she cared to admit. He had been the first person in a long time to look past her small stature, her fragile race, and truly see her strength. Little did she know, their meeting would change the course of her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The unexpected bond. The days following their first meeting seemed to pass in a blur for Princess Vilya. The court proceedings continued as usual, with delegates from all corners of the galaxy discussing matters of trade, defense, and diplomacy. But Vilya couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within her. Captain Eli Jameson had managed to do what no one else had ever done. He had made her feel seen. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she wasn't just a tiny princess to be ignored or ridiculed. She was Vilya, a person with strength and resilience, worthy of respect. After their encounter on the balcony, Eli had made a habit of seeking her out. During breaks in the court sessions, he would appear in the corridors or outside the grand hall, offering her a friendly smile and a moment of respite from the chaos. Their conversations were often lighthearted, with Eli making her laugh and reminding her of the world outside the walls of the court. It was a welcome relief for Vilya, who had long been trapped in the suffocating pressure of her royal duties and the expectations of her people. But as much as she appreciated Eli's company, there was something more happening between them, something she wasn't sure how to name. Each time they spoke, each time their eyes met, she felt a deepening connection. There was an ease between them, an unspoken understanding that made the world outside their conversations seem distant and unimportant. With Eli, she didn't have to pretend to be something she wasn't. He accepted her for who she was, and that acceptance was something Vilya had never known before. One afternoon, after another grueling session in the court chambers, Vilya found herself once again seeking solace in the quiet corners of the palace. She wandered through the marble halls, her footsteps echoing softly in the otherwise empty corridors. The weight of the day had taken its toll on her, and she longed for a moment of peace. As she passed one of the courtyards, she noticed Eli standing near a large fountain, gazing out over the gardens. The sun had just begun to set, casting a golden hue across the landscape, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. For a moment, Vilya hesitated, unsure whether she should approach. But then, as if sensing her presence, Eli turned and smiled, that warm, inviting smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Princess," he greeted her, his voice light and cheerful. "You look like you could use a break." Vilya couldn't help but smile in return. "I suppose I could. The court proceedings are as exhausting as ever." Eli chuckled and gestured to the bench beside him. "Why don't you sit with me for a while? I know a thing or two about exhaustion." Vilya hesitated for only a moment before making her way over to the bench. She sat down beside him, the cool stone of the seat providing a welcome contrast to the heat of the day. The sound of the fountain's water flowing in the background was calming, and for the first time in a long while, Vilya felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there in comfortable silence, watching as the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the world in shades of orange and pink. It was a peaceful moment, a rare one in Vilya's life, and she found herself savoring it. Eventually, Eli broke the silence. "You know, you don't have to carry all of this by yourself." Vilya turned to look at him, surprised by the weight of his words. "What do you mean?" "I mean the pressure," Eli said, his voice quiet but firm. "You don't have to be the perfect princess or the last hope for your people. You're allowed to have your moments of doubt, your moments of weakness. You're human, too." Vilya's breath caught in her throat. Human. The word felt strange, almost foreign to her, but in that moment, she understood what he meant. Eli wasn't just referring to her race, her size, or her status. He was talking about her as a person who deserved the same understanding and grace that any other individual would receive. "I've spent my whole life trying to prove myself," Vilya confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Trying to be everything everyone expects me to be. But sometimes I wonder if it's enough." Eli turned to her, his expression softening. "You're enough, Vilya. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You've already shown more strength than most people ever will, just by standing here." The sincerity in his words struck her deep, like a chord resonating in her chest. It wasn't just what he said, but the way he said it. Eli believed in her, truly believed in her. And that belief, that simple yet profound acknowledgement, was enough to make Vilya feel something she had long forgotten: hope. "You know," Vilya said after a pause, her voice steady, "it's strange. I've been surrounded by beings from all over the galaxy, aliens from countless worlds, with their own strengths and stories. But you're the first person who has ever made me feel like I matter." Eli's smile softened, and he looked at her with a mixture of admiration and affection. "You matter more than you know. And I'm not the only one who thinks that." For the first time in years, Vilya found herself believing him. She didn't know what the future held or how she would navigate the treacherous waters of galactic politics. But for the first time, she didn't feel alone. Eli had become her anchor in a world that often felt too vast and uncaring. The days that followed were filled with small, shared moments between the two of them. They would meet in the quiet corners of the palace or take walks through the gardens, exchanging stories of their worlds, their lives, and their dreams. With each passing day, Vilya found herself drawn to him more and more. There was a bond forming between them, one that neither of them had anticipated, but one that felt more real than anything she had ever experienced before. And as their connection deepened, so did Vilya's understanding of herself. She no longer saw herself as just the tiny, overlooked princess of a forgotten race. She saw herself as someone who was worthy of love, respect, and admiration. not just from others, but from herself. In the vastness of the galaxy, where the stars seemed endless and the struggles of countless races unfolded every day, Vilya had found something she had never thought possible: an ally, a friend, and perhaps something more. And with Eli by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, the Andoran would not fade into obscurity after all. An alliance formed in the shadows. As the days passed on Viridian, Princess Vilya found herself walking a path she hadn't expected. The court sessions were as taxing as ever, filled with endless discussions about trade deals, military alliances, and the future of the galaxy's political landscape. Yet, despite the growing weight of her responsibilities, there was a quiet, unspoken connection growing between her and Captain Eli Jameson. Their encounters, initially brief exchanges of pleasantries, had slowly evolved into something deeper, something more meaningful. Eli's presence had become a constant comfort to her. He seemed to appear just when she needed him most, offering a word of encouragement when the weight of the court's dismissive glances felt unbearable, or a smile that reminded her of the strength she often forgot she had. It wasn't just the warmth of his friendship that drew her to him, but the sense of unwavering support he offered. Eli was different from the other beings in the court. He didn't see her as a curiosity or a symbol of a lost empire. He saw her as an equal. One evening, after another long day of court proceedings, Vilya retreated to her private chambers. She sat at the edge of her bed, her hands resting in her lap, and gazed out the large window that overlooked the city of Viridian. The sun was setting, casting the skyline in hues of purple and gold, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel the weight of her position, the loneliness that had followed her for so many years. But as her thoughts turned inward, a soft knock at her door broke the silence. "Come in," she called, surprised by the interruption. The door opened, and there stood Eli, looking as composed and steadfast as ever, though his eyes carried a certain softness, as if he had come to offer her something more than just a casual visit. "You're not bothering me," Vilya said with a smile, gesturing for him to enter. Eli stepped inside, his boots making only the slightest sound on the polished floor. "I figured you might need a break from the politics of the day," he said, his voice low but steady. "Thought I'd offer a little distraction." Vilya smiled, grateful for his thoughtfulness. "I appreciate it. I've been trying to wrap my head around the court's latest proposal, but it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle." "Sounds exhausting," Eli replied, settling into the chair near her desk. "I can't pretend to understand the intricacies of galactic politics, but I do know what it's like to feel like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Vilya met his gaze, intrigued by the depth in his eyes. "You've carried your own burdens, haven't you?" Eli leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped in front of him. "We all have our battles," he said quietly. "Some of us fight them on the battlefield. Others fight them in the shadows. But we all face moments where we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to fight for?" Vilya considered his words carefully. She had spent so much of her life fighting for a cause, fighting for her people, for the preservation of the Andoran legacy, but she had often wondered if it was all worth it. Her people had been scattered, their cities reduced to rubble, their influence diminished by the rise of more powerful races. Yet there was still a flicker of hope within her, a belief that perhaps she could still make a difference. "What are you fighting for, Eli?" she asked, her voice gentle but full of curiosity. Eli paused, his expression thoughtful. "I fight for the future. For the idea that no matter where you come from, no matter how small you are, you can make an impact. I fight for the people who don't have a voice. And sometimes I fight because I believe in something greater than myself." Vilya felt a surge of admiration for him. She had always known that humans were resilient, but hearing him speak of his own motivations made her realize just how much more she had to learn from him. Perhaps there was a greater purpose at play here, one that went beyond the fragile politics of the court or the challenges of her people's survival. "I'm starting to think you may be right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I've been focused on the wrong battles. Eli raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean? Vilya stood and walked over to the window, her fingers tracing the cool glass as she gazed out at the sprawling city below. I've spent so long trying to save a dying empire, but maybe I should be fighting for something more than just survival. Maybe it's time for me to build something new, something that will actually make a difference. Eli's eyes softened, and he stood, walking over to her. He stood beside her, looking out at the same city, his presence a quiet comfort. I think that's a fight worth taking on, he said quietly. But whatever you decide, you don't have to do it alone. I'll be here to help, however I can. For a moment, the silence between them was filled with a new understanding, a shared recognition of the challenges they both faced, and the strength they could find in each other. Vilya had never imagined that she would find such a bond in the midst of all this turmoil. A human, a soldier with his own burdens, offering his unwavering support and belief in her. As the evening wore on, they spoke about plans, about what Vilya could do to unite the disparate factions of the galaxy, to create an alliance that would stand strong against those who sought to exploit the weak. They spoke of hope, of dreams of a future where the Andoran people could rise again, not by reclaiming their old empire, but by forging new relationships with other species, forming a coalition of strength and unity. Together, Eli said, his voice filled with conviction, we can build something greater than what came before. We can create something lasting. Vilya turned to him, her heart swelling with a newfound sense of purpose. She realized that the galaxy was vast and filled with complexities beyond her understanding. But with Eli by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were no longer just two individuals fighting their own battles. They were allies, bound by a shared mission, one that transcended politics, size, or race. I think I'm ready, she said softly, her eyes meeting his, ready to fight for something that matters. Eli smiled, his eyes gleaming with pride. Then let's do it. And with that, an alliance was formed, not just between a princess and a soldier, but between two souls who had found in each other the strength to fight for a brighter future. The gathering storm. In the weeks that followed, Princess Vilya and Captain Eli Jameson worked side by side, preparing for what seemed like an inevitable confrontation. The Galactic Court, which had long been a symbol of power and tradition, was on the brink of a major transformation. Vilya's plan to unite the galaxy's various factions, to build a coalition based on mutual respect and cooperation, had begun to take shape. Yet, the path was fraught with obstacles, as many of the galaxy's more powerful factions were unwilling to bend or compromise. To them, the idea of working alongside a small, nearly forgotten race like the Andoran seemed absurd. The tensions were palpable. Delegates from the various systems had already begun to gather in secret, forming alliances of their own in opposition to Vilya's proposal. In hushed whispers, they spoke of maintaining the status quo, of keeping the galaxy divided as it had always been. The fear of change, of a new order that might challenge their dominance, was evident in every word they spoke. The last thing they wanted was to see a weakened princess from a dying race rise to power, especially if it meant the threat of unity among the galaxy's lesser-known species. Vilya spent countless hours with Eli, poring over data and intelligence reports, trying to understand the shifting allegiances and power plays that were unfolding. The human soldier had a way of looking at situations that Vilya had never considered. His mind always focused on the bigger picture, on the long-term consequences of every decision. Where Vilya saw only the immediate political landscape, Eli saw a network of interconnected lives, ambitions, and fears that could be manipulated to their advantage. One evening, after another exhausting day of strategizing, Vilya found herself standing on the balcony of her private quarters, staring out at the city of Viridian. The lights of the sprawling metropolis twinkled like stars below her, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the responsibility that now weighed heavily on her shoulders. For so long, she had been told that her size, Her race and her perceived weakness were liabilities, but now she understood that they could be her greatest strengths. She had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Eli's presence had become as familiar to her as the stars in the sky. "You look like you're thinking about something important," he said, his voice warm but tinged with concern. Vilya smiled faintly. "I suppose I am. The more I think about this, the more I realize how much is at stake. If I fail, it could mean the end for my people, and for so many others who are counting on me." Eli stepped closer, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the hallway behind him. "You're not alone in this, Vilya. We've been planning together for weeks, and you've already gained support from people who believe in you. You don't have to carry the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders alone." She turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. But what if it's not enough? What if the galaxy is too divided, too entrenched in its own power, struggles to change? Eli placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his gaze unwavering. "Then we'll show them that change is possible. We'll do what others won't. We'll prove that even the smallest of us can make a difference." Vilya's heart swelled with both fear and hope. She had spent her life being told that she was insignificant, that her efforts would amount to nothing. But now, standing here with Eli by her side, she could see the possibility of something greater. She could see a future where the Andoran were not just a fading relic of the past, but a force to be reckoned with. The days that followed were filled with secret meetings, covert alliances, and tense negotiations. Vilya and Eli worked tirelessly to secure the support of those who were still undecided, carefully navigating the treacherous waters of galactic diplomacy. It wasn't easy, and there were many times when Vilya felt as though she was swimming against the current, but she refused to back down. She knew that if she did, everything she had fought for, everything her people had endured, would be lost. Then, just as things seemed to be coming together, a message arrived that changed everything. It was a coded transmission from an unknown source, warning Vilya of a conspiracy within the Galactic Court. A faction of powerful delegates, led by a high-ranking military officer from the Arcturians, had been plotting to overthrow the court and seize control of the galaxy's most influential systems. Their plan was to destabilize the delicate balance of power by igniting a war, one that would keep the galaxy divided and prevent any attempts at unification. Vilya's pulse quickened as she read the message. She had suspected that something like this was coming, but to have it confirmed was both terrifying and empowering. The enemy wasn't just the passive resistance of those who oppose her vision. It was an active, calculated effort to destroy everything she was working toward. "We need to move fast," Eli said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We can't let them pull the galaxy back into chaos." Vilya nodded, her resolve hardening. "We'll need to expose their plan before it's too late. If we can reveal their conspiracy to the court, we might be able to gain the support of those who are still undecided." Eli glanced at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Are you sure you're ready for this? It's a risky move, and if they catch wind of what we're doing—" "I don't have a choice," Vilya interrupted, her voice filled with determination. "I spent too long waiting for the right moment. Now it's time to take action." The plan was set into motion immediately. Using the intelligence they had gathered over the past few weeks, Vilya and Eli began to carefully maneuver through the court's many factions, gathering evidence of the conspiracy and sharing it with those who could help expose it. They knew they couldn't trust anyone completely, but with Eli's military experience and Vilya's understanding of galactic politics, they were able to play a dangerous game of shadows. As the days passed, the tension in the court grew. There were whispers in the hallways, rumors of betrayal, and signs that the conspirators were beginning to panic. Vilya's heart raced as she moved deeper into the intrigue, knowing that the stakes had never been higher. It wasn't just the future of the Andoran at risk anymore. The fate of the entire galaxy now hung in the balance. The unraveling web. The following days felt like a battle fought in silence, each step taken in the shadows, away from the eyes of those who might notice. Princess Villia's plan was now in full swing, and with each passing moment, the tension in the galactic court grew. The conspiracy that threatened to plunge the galaxy back into war was unraveling, but with it came new risks, risks that made every choice, every move, more dangerous than the last. Gilead had come to realize that the enemy they were facing wasn't just a single faction of delegates, it was an entire system of power that had been in place for millennia. The Galactic Court, with all its pomp and tradition, had become a place where the most powerful races, the most influential families, manipulated the future of entire star systems without regard for the smaller, struggling civilizations. Now, the very court that was meant to represent the galaxy's unity was being used as a tool of division. Villia couldn't help but wonder how long it had been like this, how long the galaxy had been trapped in the grip of power-hungry beings who saw no value in cooperation or unity. But as she navigated the dark waters of diplomacy, she began to see something else as well. She saw the cracks in the system, small but significant fractures that, if exploited, could bring the whole corrupt structure crashing down. Her meetings with Eli had grown more intense. With each passing hour, they refined their strategy, discussing how to gather more allies, how to move with greater precision, and how to stay one step ahead of the conspirators. Villia had come to trust Eli's judgment implicitly. His ability to see through deception and his courage in the face of danger were qualities she had come to rely on more than she had ever expected. One evening, as they gathered in a dimly lit room within the palace, Eli leaned over a holographic display, his fingers moving across the projection of the galaxy's star systems. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the equipment, but there was an underlying sense of urgency that filled the air. "The Arcturians are the key," Eli said, his voice steady but laced with the weight of the situation. "They control the military fleet, and they've been the driving force behind this conspiracy. If we can expose their involvement and show the rest of the court what they're planning, we might have a chance." Villia nodded, her mind racing. She knew Eli was right. The Arcturians had the resources to start a war, an all-out galactic conflict that would tear apart any hope of peace. Their military might, combined with the support of a handful of powerful families, would create an unshakable foundation of fear and chaos. But if they could stop the Arcturians, if they could prove to the rest of the galaxy that these elites were willing to sacrifice everything for their own power, they might have the opportunity to rally enough support to dismantle the old system. "We have to move quickly," Villia said, her voice filled with resolve. "We can't let them escalate this any further. But we need more proof. Something concrete that will expose them for what they truly are." Eli's eyes darkened as he considered the situation. "I've been in contact with some of the other factions who are still undecided. They're afraid to act without hard evidence, afraid that siding with you might be seen as a political misstep. We need to give them something they can't ignore." Villia knew that the galaxy's leaders, for all their talk of diplomacy and cooperation, were ultimately motivated by one thing: self-preservation. If she could give them a reason to support her, to stand against the Arcturians, then they would have no choice but to join her cause. "There's one group left we haven't approached," Villia said, tapping the holographic map. "The Valorians. They're a relatively neutral faction, but they control a significant amount of trade routes between key systems. If we can convince them to stand with us, we'll have the leverage we need to sway the rest of the court." Eli studied the map, his finger tracing the Valorian system. "They're not going to be easy to convince. They're pragmatic, and they'll want something in return, something substantial." Villia's mind raced. She had no illusions about the Valorians. They weren't driven by ideals or morals. They were motivated by power, resources, and strategic advantage. But if she could promise them something they needed, perhaps she could turn the tide in her favor. The Valorians had long coveted the trade routes of the Arcturians, and if they saw the possibility of dismantling the Arcturian military's grip on those routes, they might be persuaded to join her. The plan was set in motion almost immediately. Vilya sent a private transmission to the Valorian representative, offering a meeting to discuss the future of the galaxy. The message was crafted carefully, with just enough intrigue to spark their interest, but not enough to give away her true intentions. The Valorians would have to be handled delicately. They were sharp, and any hint of desperation or weakness would send them running to the Arcturians. The next few days were filled with anticipation. Vilya and Eli worked tirelessly, gathering every piece of information they could on the Valorians, learning their habits, their motivations, and their vulnerabilities. But as they prepared for the crucial meeting, something unexpected happened. A sudden shift in the court's atmosphere signaled that the conspiracy was gaining traction. Delegates who had once seemed neutral were beginning to side with the Arcturians, and the rhetoric of war was growing louder. Vilya could feel the pressure mounting. The Valorians would have to be convinced soon, or the entire galaxy would be on the brink of open conflict. And then, a breakthrough. Eli had managed to secure an audience with the leader of the Valorian delegation, a shrewd negotiator named Thera Vaughn. She was known for her ability to balance competing interests, always looking for ways to expand Valoria's influence. Eli had set up a private meeting, and the two would meet in a secure location away from the prying eyes of the court. Vilya's heart pounded in her chest as she awaited word from Eli. This was the moment they had been working for, the chance to bring one of the galaxy's most influential factions to their side. The outcome of this meeting would determine the fate of the galaxy. If they succeeded, they would have a powerful ally. But if they failed, Vilya shook her head, refusing to entertain the thought. Failure was not an option. She had come too far, and there was too much at stake for her people, for Eli, for the future of the galaxy. With a final glance at the map before her, she stood, ready for whatever came next. The web of intrigue and deception was tightening around them, but with each strand they pulled, the truth was slowly coming into focus. The price of unity. The meeting with Thera Vaughn, leader of the Valorian delegation, was set to take place in the dead of night, away from the eyes and ears of the ever-watchful court. The shadows of Viridian Palace stretched long as Princess Vilya made her way through the dimly lit hallways, her heart heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. Eli, as always, stood by her side, his calm demeanor offering her a sense of security amid the looming uncertainty. The Valorians were known for their pragmatism, their ability to read the room and extract the most favorable deal for their people. It was that very pragmatism that had made them so difficult to convince in the past. Nothing short of a game-changing opportunity would win them over. Vilya knew she had to offer them something substantial, something that would outweigh their loyalty to the Arcturians, who had held sway over the galaxy's key trade routes for centuries. This was not a simple negotiation. It was a delicate dance, and one misstep could send the Valorians straight into the arms of the conspirators. Eli's voice broke through her thoughts as they approached the entrance to the secluded meeting room. Remember, we're not just offering a bargain. You're offering them a chance to reshape the future of the galaxy. They'll want power, influence, and security. It's up to you to show them how that aligns with your vision. Vilya nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. I know, but I also know that Thera won't be easily swayed. She'll want something concrete. We'll give it to her, Eli replied with a reassuring smile. And if she doesn't want to play nice, we'll give her no choice. With that, they entered the meeting room, a stark contrast to the opulence of the court. It was a small, functional chamber, devoid of any unnecessary decoration, with a single table at its center. The walls were lined with dark metallic panels, and soft, ambient lighting cast long shadows across the floor. At the far end of the room stood Thera Vaughn, her piercing blue eyes studying Vilya with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Princess Vilya, Thera greeted, her voice smooth but sharp, like the cutting edge of a blade. I wasn't expecting such a personal visit. What brings you to my door? Vilya didn't flinch under Thera's gaze. I come not as a princess, but as an ally. I'm here to offer you something no one else can." Thera raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but not yet convinced. "An ally? You're offering me the future of your people. The Andoran are a dying race, your empire long gone. What could you possibly offer that would make me reconsider my loyalties?" Eli stood silently beside Vilya, observing the interaction. He knew this was her moment, and she had to take control of the conversation. Vilya stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with determination. "I'm offering you more than just the last remnants of my people's legacy. I'm offering you a place in the future, a future where the galaxy is united under a new banner, a future where the Valorians no longer stand at the mercy of the Arcturians." Thera's expression softened for a moment, but Vilya saw the calculating look in her eyes. She was considering the offer, perhaps more seriously than she had let on. But the skepticism remained. "And what exactly do you want in exchange for this future?" Thera asked, her tone now tinged with both caution and curiosity. Vilya took a deep breath. "I want you to join me, to stand by my side in forging a new alliance, an alliance of races, each with their own strengths and interests, but united in purpose. The Arcturians will no longer control the key trade routes, and the galaxy will no longer be divided by the whims of power-hungry elites. Together, we can reshape the future, and the Valorians. You'll be at the forefront of this new order." There was a long silence as Thera considered Vilya's words. The tension in the room was palpable, every second dragging on as Vilya waited for the Valorian leader to make her decision. Finally, Thera spoke. "And what's in it for me?" she asked, her voice low but intense. Vilya didn't hesitate. "Security, control over the trade routes you've always coveted, a seat at the table of the new Galactic Council, with the power to influence the future of the galaxy. I'm not asking you to simply join an alliance. I'm offering you a partnership." For a moment, Thera's eyes narrowed, as if weighing the truth in Vilya's words. But then, a slow smile crept across her lips. "You think you can offer me everything I want?" she asked, her voice almost mocking. "I know I can," Vilya replied, meeting her gaze unwaveringly. "If you help me now, I'll ensure that you are rewarded. The Arcturians have outlived their usefulness. They've grown arrogant in their power. And soon, that arrogance will be their downfall." Thera's smile faded, and she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms thoughtfully. "You're bold, Princess. I'll give you that. But the question remains, what makes you think I can trust you? After all, you're a mere figurehead, a princess with no army, no real power. The Arcturians could crush you with a single command. And if you fail..." Vilya's eyes flashed with fire. "I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking for the opportunity to show you that I can deliver on my promise. And as for the Arcturians, no one is invincible, not even them." The silence that followed was deafening. Thera was still considering, still testing Vilya's resolve. Eli shifted beside her, his hand subtly resting on the hilt of his sidearm. He knew this moment was crucial, but Vilya had been right all along. The Valorians only respected strength. And now, she was showing it. Finally, Thera spoke again, her voice quieter, almost thoughtful. "You've got guts, Princess. I'll give you that. But I won't commit until I see something more than words. Something tangible. If you can deliver on this promise, if you can show me that the Arcturians' hold on the galaxy is weakening, I'll join you. Until then, consider this an offer on the table." Vilya nodded, understanding the weight of Thera's words. "You'll have your proof. We'll act quickly. The conspiracy will be exposed, and when it is, the galaxy will see that your offer is not just a gamble, it's the future." As Thera turned to leave, her eyes lingered on Vilya for a moment, almost as if she were measuring the princess's resolve. Then, without another word, she exited the room, leaving Vilya and Eli standing in the dim glow of the holographic map. "We've got work to do," Eli said, his voice steady as always. "But this is good. Thera is a powerful ally. If we can deliver on our promise, We might just win the support we need. Vilya took a deep breath, the weight of the task ahead settling over her. We'll deliver. We must. The galaxy's fate hung in the balance, but now, with the Valorians in play, there was a glimmer of hope. But hope came with a price, and Vilya knew that the true battle had only just begun.